formed in a dream, kept in a thought, carried across oceans, spoken in whispers, passed down from elders, planted in gardens of okra, prayed for in sanctuary, resisted with fury, protected with faith, created with love, born into being, from root to bone. You are here.
This podcast talks about colonial, racial, and gender-based violence. Please listen at your own pace and capacity. And remember to do what you need to do to care for yourself if you feel activated by this content. Should you need resources, please check out our section on resources at decolonizingtherapy.com. Be well. Welcome, my good people. This is Dr. Jenn, founder of Decolonizing Therapy, and your host for this beautiful podcast, From Root to Bone with Dr. Jenn. Today, I am deeply excited for our finale. Dun, dun, dun. Cue some kind of cute music, please. Right now, we have a mover, a shaker, a badass, a brother, someone that just... When I get around Dr. Evan, I just feel a kinship. I don't know if it's like as I said before, like cute nerds unite, right? With like a little fist up and a little side, like, boop, boop. It's like little Power Ranger kind of thing. But this brother is just like a fresh of breath air in so many ways, shapes, and forms. And I cannot wait for y'all to hear more from him, body, mind, and soul, and all the ways that he brings in his wisdom and weaves it into a really personalized, brilliant, clear, direct, unapologetic, black-ass, radical, yet nurturing way. Yeah. So Dr. Evan, as we do here around these parts, we would like for you to receive, because so often those of us in these positions, we give and give and give and give. And we'd like you to receive some of your flowers. Yeah. So today, Dr. Jenn is bringing in something. I'm speaking in the third person today. I don't know what that's about. However, maybe that will uncover itself. I am bringing in an image that I pull cards. Most of you know it's part of my other ways of knowing. I like to joke around, is it neurodivergence? Or is it AI, ancestral intelligence, or both? Ha ha ha. Next episode. But I pull cards every morning. And a card that I pulled this morning felt like if Dr. Evan might be an animal, this might be this might be his little animal, his energy. And it was the goat. Right. And Evan and I, partake in love, as well as our producer Tribble in hip hop. But it's like GOAT, right? Greatest of all time. So doop. But also the word associated with it was reliability. And I feel like you're a very reliable person, a very solid, grounded person. I know you are not a lover of astrology. Don't come for him, y'all. I'm working on him. Although he's not a lover of astrology, you were Taurus, my G. So, there's a groundedness, there's a steadiness, a home when you're around, when someone gets to know you, when you unfurl, in my humble opinion. So we're going to tell you about Dr. Auguste in just a second. Okay. So I've decided to pick something rather recent. This isn't one of Dr. Evan's big literary papers. You can definitely find some peer-reviewed journals, honey. You can find, this brother has written and will slay. This is on Instagram, in support also with Ida, and I also think Beam. We love ourselves, Ida and Beam. And so I'm going to start reading, and we would love for you to receive. Yeah. And so it says Menticide. Did you hear that, y'all? Menticide and psychological oppression, the unseen wounds of colonial violence. Now, mind you, this is a part 5. So if you want to get to know more, you need to follow and get up on it. And this is inspired by the work of psychologist brother Bobby Wright. So let's just be clear. So what is menticide? Yes, we all want to know, Dr. E. African peoples worldwide, from the Congo to Sudan to Haiti, are living in the wake of ongoing campaigns of genocidal violence. According to the Association of Black Psychologists, this is an intentional process to suppress indigenous African consciousness. Pause for effect. Psychologist Bobby Wright termed this process menticide, a political and psychological tool that erases African worldviews, suppresses resistance, and reinforces perceptions of African inferiority. He wrote in 1984, menticide was developed to combat the rising level of consciousness and Black nationalism, which threatened the process of European world domination. We did not stutter. We did not stutter. A tool of white supremacy. Sit back, Evan. Sit back, Evan. We got you. We got you. Let me read to you. A tool of white supremacy. Menticide is a deliberate strategy of white supremacy. By severing African people from their history, their intergenerational memory, and cultural knowledge, it is easier to weaken resistance. Feel like the meme, the meme with the brother who's like, now you know, right? Colonial powers and white supremacist systems understand that controlling Black consciousness is as critical as physical domination, which we know did occur. Okay. But in slavery and in plantations, right? Like that wasn't just a physical process, that was also psychological, but I'm going to shut up now. This process continues through media, education, and policy. School curriculums erase African history, news narratives criminalize Black identity, and governments perpetuate anti-Black violence. Menticide ensures that even in resistance, Black communities remain psychologically trapped within structures of oppression. We're going to pull it together for you, though. Menticide and Black mental health, because your mental health matters. In Black psychology, menticide is a framework for understanding how historical and present-day policies shape Black mental health, right? So we're talking about the past, and we're talking about present-day impacting future. Wright argued that Black distress is not an individual failing, right? So important, but a condition, manufactured fucking arrangement, right? By white supremacy. Psychologist and theorist Daudi Anjani Azibo expanded Wright's theory, framing self-harm among Black people as high-tech lynching, a systemic process of socio-political harm. Menticide distorts Black identity, fostering internalized anti-Blackness, collective trauma, and emotional disconnection. It frames structural violence as personal pathology, shifting attention from systems of harm to individual blame. Okay, one more little thing, because I just love it all. One more little thing, right? I'm going to skip ahead, if that's okay with you, Dr. Evan, historian, my love, I used to have a crush on Walter Rodney, argued that African societies sustain themselves through kinship and cultural tradition, right? So around these parts, we're aware of what has and continues to impact us, and what is the remedy? What sets us free? What continues to radicalize and elevate us, right? Kinship and cultural traditions. Colonization weaponized these structures, weakening communities and making them vulnerable to genocide, cultural erasure, and economic devastation. Menticide operates globally by severing historical memory. I'm going to say that line again for you. Menticide operates globally by severing historical memory and ensuring that Black liberation struggles remain disconnected from one another. Dr. Evan Auguste is an incoming assistant professor of psychology at the John Jay School of Criminal Justice. Brothers coming to the East Coast, or closer to me. His identities as a Haitian-African American man have informed his work on examining how the American history of anti-Blackness has shaped psychological realities both in and outside of this country's borders. He is the director of the Asili Collective, a research group whose work focuses broadly on addressing the mental health consequences of structural anti-Blackness through the lens of Black liberation psychology. He is also the co-developer of the Sawubona Healing Circles for the Association of Black Psychologists. And if that was not enough, he is also the lead facilitator within Cultured Company and on the board for the Institute for the Development of Human Arts, also known as IDA. And I have to say that Dr. Evan and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're connected by one of, I would say, Dr. Evan's students. And I would even say like somebody that I was sort of mentoring, that this amazing being. Ethel, shout out to you. We adore you. And we're so proud of you. So proud of you for keeping this work alive and for your very existence, honey. Serve us all day. And what I will say is when I first engaged with you and your work, I felt your spirit before I even officially met you. So without further ado, Dr. Evan, welcome.
I don't even know what to say. I don't even have the words. Wow. I appreciate you so deeply. I'll tell you the reaction I'm having right now is I'm listening to the words that you're saying, the person that you're describing, and that's who I aspire to.
Mm.
I wake up every day thinking, how could I do work? How could I be in space in a way to inhabit the presence of the person that you just described? And so when you say that, I'm still like, I feel like there's still parts of me that wants to push in more ways, dig deeper. But I'm honored. I'm honored to be in conversation with you.
We're honored to have you. And we hope you keep receiving it. Yeah. And we want the world to understand the potency of what Dr. Evan is doing at this time and how it is helping to co-create and shift not just psychology and psychologists, which is crucial as well, because we need to evolve with times, right? But I would even dare say, Evan, like Black identity,
Mm.
and how we walk and see ourselves. So I'm also wondering what you might have brought with you today for our virtual altar.
Sure.
And yeah, any thoughts about what you bring on?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this for so long. And for the people behind the scenes, we've been playing tag a little bit, so I'm happy that we're finally here, right? Recorded the episode, and I needed that time. I needed
Mm.
that time to really think about what I wanted to bring, who I wanted to bring. And so I chose, and it was, he was staring at me this morning. It's a photo of my maternal
Mm.
grandfather, Solomon Big Daddy Harris. He's a lot of people know about my work in Haiti. My mother always says you have to make sure people know both of your traditions, all of your histories together. And so my mother is from Bracy, Virginia. When I go down there and I see the cemetery, I can see generations of my maternal family there. Like all of that story, people who cultivate the land, people who built the local churches, people who prayed there, people who protected one another. And when I hear stories about him, I never got to meet my maternal grandfather,
Mm.
uh, meet this man. And so I only receive, piecemeal stories here and there. He never left Virginia. He never left that town. My grandmother who went to Harlem, he stayed there. And the stories I heard from him are he's the one who would be always working with his hands. He come home after a hard day work, drank, play the piano. And so when I think about the energy I'm receiving when I'm like, okay, it's time to get to work. Right? There's no right shifting either way. It's I have to move right in the center, face things head on. I think about his energy. He's actually the first, when I first got to graduate school, I wrote a piece about him because he helped me understand the idea of John Henryism, that idea of
Mm.
when you work so hard that eventually it takes a toll on your body. Uh, and so it's part of the reason I never got to meet him is he really worked himself, unfortunately, to an early grave, but it was for his family.
Mm.
In a time when, again, there was fewer opportunities in the way that we know. And so honoring that energy and learning how to, I think balance is a aspirational, sometimes fictional word, but how to honor that in a way that still nonetheless nourishes me and the people that I care about. So that's Solomon Big Daddy Harris.
Solomon Big Daddy Harris, welcome. We welcome your energy and thank you for all of your contributions and your presence in this world and bringing forth Dr. Evan, you know? And so thank you for that. Thank you for placing that on our virtual altar. And it leads me to wonder, so how do you ensure,
Mhm.
whether consciously or not, that you're not participating in that working yourself to the bone, that John Henryism energy? How do
Mm.
you make sure that that doesn't happen?
It's difficult. I realized it's one of the pieces, if I'm being honest with myself, that helps me cope with these moments. I do clinical psychology, I do healing circles, I teach, I do forensic psychology. And each of these different pieces help me feel like I'm constantly like that my work, my body, my energy, my spirit is all in alignment. And so when I experience distress, I have an outlet that I can almost like pour that energy into. And so it looks like we're gonna do a healing circle, or we're gonna take that case. We're gonna make sure that person doesn't get incarcerated. We're going to shape a lesson around this to help people understand what's going on a bit more deeply. And so I noticed that about myself. My friends get on me all the time that I really will, whenever I'm activated, dig into that. And so what I've been attempting to do the last few years is, again, remember that you have to nourish all these different pieces. And so for me, it's been, all right, you know that when it comes to work, when you get stressed, you'll pour everything in there. Don't forget you have to nourish, right, body, spirit. So it's things that have been transformational, simple, right? There's a group of 25 to late 30s men I play basketball with Monday and Tuesday. I will not miss that, right? Whatever is going on, I will be there, missing jump shots, sometimes hitting jump shots and letting everybody when I hit the jump shots. Um, because it's such a great grounding for me, right? To really inhabit and be present with my body. Um, to get better at something that's aside from everything else, to inhabit all the different energies that sometimes you're in spaces where you can't release that energy. I could be angry there. If you found me, why'd you do that? Right. In the professional spaces, I might, keep that under wraps, but there's like, yo, why would you do that? And everybody's bringing that energy too, because they know this is a place where we can really release the full range of our emotions afterwards. It's going to be dapping up. It's going to be hugs. So for right now, that's what I've found, right? Is those other
Beautiful.
places to ground myself.
Yes. And we need those, like those anchors,
Yeah.
right? Those people, places, and spaces where we can unfurl a bit is what I hear. Yeah, that unfurling is so needed, especially when I correct me if I'm wrong. We enter a field that feels so very Eurocentric.
Yeah.
Yeah, not necessarily who we might connect ourselves and surround ourselves with, but in general, even the very fabric of the theories that we learned and how we work, we've had to relearn and unlearn, right? And do our own education with great mentors, elders, teachers, and what have you. And so, for folks out there that are like, okay, we watch CSI or we watch when I think of forensics, I think oftentimes people are thinking of like forensic pathology, I think. So I'm wondering if you can give us like a quick understanding of like, what is forensic psychology and like, what do you do? Because I
Yeah.
don't know if people ever answer that question. You feel me? And also, let me see if I can wrap my head around this. How do you, knowing what you do and who you are, the shit you write about, right? How do you practice, air quotes if you're not able to see me, how do you practice forensic psychology in a anti-colonial as possible way or lens?
I love this. So this is a great question. I would say two things. So to the first piece, you're right. Everybody thinks about Criminal Minds. Everybody thinks about CSI. People come to me as like, I want to understand serial killers. Why do people do what they do? Because that's what they see on Netflix. That's what they see on their true crime podcast. Forensic psychology broadly is the intersection of psychology and law. Everything that falls in that intersection is forensic psychology. There's a longer practice-based definition, but simply like that's a really strong way to understand it. And so yes, right. If you're thinking about psychologists in prison settings, jail settings, those are forensic psychologists, right? People who work in foster care, people who work at court clinics, those are forensic
Mm.
psychologists. People who do assessment for litigation, forensic psychologists, right? Asylum evaluations, forensic psychologists. So it's a really diverse range of work. The second question, I'm going to reorder them a bit, is how do you practice then this profession that is so embedded in so many cultural systems in an anti-colonial liberatory way? I was talking with a mentor of mine who's like, those things seem like they're in contradiction. And when I came to it, I thought it was deeply surprising that so many of my colleagues in psychology were writing about liberatory frameworks. They were writing about wanting to resist systems of oppression and power. And right here, you have this sub-discipline that directly shapes people's experiences of that. And I
Hmm.
think people would be surprised how much power a forensic psychological evaluation can have in the trajectory of somebody's life. As a plain example, one of my first parole evaluations when I was in grad school was a Black woman who had been incarcerated for over, at the time I remember, it was as long as I'd been alive. So I think it was
Mm.
20 years at the time. And we're reading through the case notes, and I see the entirety of the distress that she'd been through was erased because a white psychiatrist who, as we had found out, had fabricated some of his credentials, went on the stand and said this person was malingering.
Mm.
Malingering means they think you're faking your mental health distress for a benefit. The benefit being they don't want us to take accountability for what they did. So because of
Mm.
that, by the letter of the law, every piece of trauma and distress and pain this person went through was tossed out by the court at a life sentence. I could go through the records and see, oh, this person had tried to receive care and was turned away for lack of insurance.
Mm.
All things directly leading up to the incident. And I was able to sit with that person. I remember it was about 2 interviews. Forensic interviews are long, so I was with this person for 6 hours, hearing the
Woo.
hearing their pain, hearing about their family, um, and getting to rewrite that story. And in a few months, right, we take this person who's been incarcerated for 27 years, and we're able to leverage their story. Shout out to also some great law students, some law professors as well, and get that person free.
Yes.
Me, I'm like, "Oh, we can really." It's not just about writing critique. Like, here's an area of intervention. We could open up the cage door.
Mm. Say that again.
And
Ooh.
so it's my first time. This is me as a grad student. I'm a part of 2 more of those cases. So we get 3 people free in my first year with them. They do fantastic work. Shout out to the Fordham Legal Clinic, Lincoln Center Legal Services. Uh, And so that was initially incepted the idea that, okay, if we put this energy, like we're looking at the field of Black psychology, we'll talk about that, I'm sure. And I'm looking at forensic psychology. Let's bring these together and see how many of these doors we could get open. Right. That led me to really want to dig into that question. Right? Okay, how could I really practice this? How could I really practice this from a liberatory standpoint? And so my first volume, which shout out to you for giving me some feedback on one of my chapters, right? It's coming out this summer. It's called The Carceral State, Forensic Psychology and Black Resistance. Let them not be forgotten. Was the goal was let me find as many of these people who are thinking in a similar way, right? Who are in the practice of getting people free, or in the practice of co-creating spaces of healing and justice outside of the carceral state, right? And direct people here. Because if you go to these forensic psychological spaces for the longest time, right, this discipline that has a tremendous amount of power in shaping people's life has been shaped disproportionately by conservative white theories and ideas. Very shallow criminological theories that erase the potential for other ways of practicing community, justice, and healing. So that's how I try to do my work. And so whether it be asylum evaluation, mitigation, parole evaluations for people engaged in activism, it's how can we use these tools for the people which only ever been used to, right, vanish, erase, and incarcerate. It's a long answer.
Yeah. No, it required that kind of answer. I thought it was a beautiful answer. And what I'm hearing you say is that this work and doing it in a very particular, clear, nuanced way with a very expansive lens, right? Looking at context, right? Looking at environment, looking at it's not just malingering, and right. And of course, whiteness. I'm generalizing, but right, the water of whiteness. Not we're not just talking about the sharks, right? But like white supremacy as its function. Of course, what it does is take whatever areas that might be perceived as weakness, quotation marks, right, or holes, and say, like find a way to sort of crack us and break us, like to break the big spirit, right? And it's right, and it sounds like whether this person was feeling deep grief, anger, rage, frustration, whatever it was pathologized in some way.
Exactly, exactly. That's it. And so
Mm.
sometimes I have these conversations and people react like, "Oh, this seems like a particularly like radical way of practicing." And I found there's almost a lack of I think it's a lack of creativity that some people have. I'm gonna dig in to some of what Amos Wilson said. Amos Wilson talks about because when the world ends, it's not going to be robbers and burglars. It's going to be PhDs, right?
Mm.
Uncritically, right? Exercise state power and planning in ways that lead to broad devastation. And so you have a lot of forensic psychologists who are brilliant people who think their course of work is or has already been predetermined. So they could do nothing other than, right, lead to the quickening of the erasure of people. The fact of the matter is, and this is what you go to any of these forensic psychology conferences, they'll say this, like, the evidence is squarely in the opposite direction. Like, we know this, right? We know the negative impacts of policing, right? We know the negative impacts of incarceration. We know institutionalization isn't, right, the best way to deal with people who are in deep stress. In fact, it further harms them. Like we know all of these pieces, right, to the degree that we can, because there's a whole range of people who are not even allowed to be researched because back in the 80s and 90s, they were torturing people. So now we can't even uplift their voices, right, in the same way when it comes to research. But people have their scope of work so myopic, so myopically centralized within how can I optimize this institution?
Mm. Mm.
So
Mm.
that's how I see my work. That is like there are people who already been doing it. When we dig into the history, we can look at a Thomas Hilliard. We can look at Magnani in South Africa. We can look at
Mm.
Rudy Mars in Haiti. We can see I'm not making stuff up. There are traditions here. There are modes of practice here that we're not picking up that have already been effective in recent history, in older history. Right. So let's lean in.
Yes. Yes. Everyone, I hope you're lean, not back, lean forward. And as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, sometimes we find people exactly when we need to, right? Including, right, the Naeem Akbars and the Thomas Hilliards and the Walter Rodney. I remember picking up, my dissertation was on like the soul wound. And it was called From the Cotton Fields to the Concrete Jungles, right? And basically I was looking at this concept of like the soul wound, historical trauma, and intergenerational trauma transmission, and how that showed up in young Black males of the African diaspora. Because that's predominantly who I was serving and working with within the prison industrial complex, but as well as in like hospital systems, right? They were psychiatrically incarcerated, so to speak. And I'm thinking to myself at the time, feeling very lonely and isolated, right? Like as an advanced grad student, thinking about my own identities, thinking about how I came up, my cousins having been incarcerated, people in my life, committing crimes, me having brief stints, 15, 16 years old within the criminal justice system, system. And I'm thinking about why I so deeply fucks with you, and how we like orbit around each other and our work in so many ways, because that's how I feel about clinical psychology, right? Like I got into this work because I saw the youth, oh, he's schizoaffective, well, that's bipolar disorder, or he's intermittent explosive, or da, 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 da. Like, yo, let's look at the chart. Let's talk to him. Let's talk to his family members. Let's talk. Wait, he has a favorite second cousin. What would that be like to bring in second cousin so they could play, hang out, and can they both talk to me? Oh, that would be dangerous. Why would that be dangerous? Why can't his 15-year-old second cousin give me a little bit of insight of how drastic it was for his father to get up and leave when his quote unquote behavioral issues started, how that plays out into whatever his offense was, right? And what does repair look like? Not just like this rehabilitation, although there's a part for that, but like, what does repair and healing look like? I hope what I'm saying makes sense. And so for me, like Dr. Naeem Akbar, I keep bringing him, but like Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary, more recently finding Dr. Frederick Hinkling, rest in peace, out of Jamaica, like finding folks that really ripped it wide open for me. Dr. Maria Yellowhorse Braveheart, Dr. Michael Yellowbird with like neuropsych and psychology and indigenous ways of knowing, like these folks and folks that you've mentioned. What I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, is that they also allowed us to feel seen, to feel like there's a path, right? Let me clear it out a little more. Let me, not that they don't already do beautiful work, but let me re-uplift what these elders, these ancestors, because that is ancestral work, right?
That's it. No, you're naming it. And for me, it's two pieces, right? One is I had this idea in grad school, right? That it's basically like, listen, I'm seeing the same structures that everybody else is seeing. There have been people who've been brilliantly thinking about this for as long as they have been. And so I know for sure I am not the first person to try this. And so now I got to go look. That's where I would start. Like, I got to go find somebody. Right. And so I think people will be surprised. Like conversations that were happening that are happening now that seem new. There's no you'll read somebody writing in the 20s, in the 30s, 50s. You'll find ancestral traditions being practiced. You're like, oh, it sounds like they're speaking for right now because they were seeing some of the same patterns of violence and domination. Oh, I started reading Louis Mars. Louis Mars is Haiti's first psychiatrist, right? And him thinking through how Haitian Vodou can be used as a system of care. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
this somebody thinking about this before Fanon, right?
Yes.
As an Afro-Caribbean psychiatrist before Fanon, thinking about the long-term effects of occupation and domination, right? Thomas Hilliard, same piece. Right now, we're dealing with how do we support people who are politically incarcerated. We're watching students get snatched up.
Yes.
And so for me, looking at, oh, there have been forensic psychologists who were intentional about their practice in support of people who are incarcerated politically, right? Thomas Hilliard, right? Doing his work in the Angela Davis trial. Joy James named a whole range of historical facts that are necessary to contextualize that, but nonetheless, his level of engagement in ensuring, right, that her freedom was that much more possible. His work with the San Quentin Six, getting them to be removed from, right, solitary confinement, which is being used effectively and continues to be used as torture in a lot of these places.
There you go.
And going all the way to Mangiani doing his work in apartheid South Africa, right?
Mm.
Sitting in the courtroom with freedom fighters who've been engaged in violent resistance, and him submitting reports on the psychological harms of apartheid on these fighters so the judges wouldn't send them all, right, to die. And having efficacy, getting a number of people free. And so we have these tools, we have these stories, we have these strategies.
Yes.
What does it mean to, again, Sankofa? Let's take that, bring it here, see how we can remix it for our time right now.
I hope you are all receiving this and really understanding how Dr. Evan is breaking it down for you, and how forensic, conscious, anti-colonial, black ass forensic psychology is needed in the work that we're doing today, in the liberation and the activism, and I think these futures that we're attempting to co-create. Yeah. And I mean, I've got to say, Haiti for me has been such an inspiration, like in reading and understanding and looking at decoloniality within myself, but in people, like, yo, these cats won this. Like this was a this was war on war. This was fighting and holding down my land, my people, my customs, my ways of being. And I think any of us that have done any kind of studying, reading, knowing a little bit about history, but I'm going to put this, ask you, because this is your expertise, my brother, like, are there, I'm going to be objective a second. Are there connections and correlations, right, between voodoo and strong cultural beliefs, right, and customs and traditions, and this ability to push France out and win? Yeah, and the Haitian Revolution. And is that a silly question? And if it is, you can call me, you can call me out on that. And though, what could we learn from Haitians and this ongoing struggle, current day as well, with coloniality, right? And in all the ways I think other violent countries, perhaps even our own, attempt to use and abuse and infiltrate and colonize lands, but particularly Haiti. So, yeah.
It's a beautiful question. I'm thinking about it in 3 parts. Because the first answer is like, clearly like, yes, right? Like Haitian Vodou, the ceremony of Bois Caiman was used to usher in the revolution. And even prior to that, you had people engaging in resistance through a spiritual practice. So people know the names of Toussaint. People might know Boukman Dati and Cécile Fatiman. People might be a little bit less familiar with Francois Macandal, who'd already begun, right, his resistance work in Haiti, using his indigenous knowledge of medicines and potions, and how do we, right, poison the enslavers, right, to get them out here. So pretty leading resistance, right? For people who think about it as a long revolt, some people say, right, even after they captured and killed him, he still was a part of the fighting. They say he shifted into mosquitoes and was able to spread disease among, right, the French soldiers to aid in the warfare. So Haitian Vodou, not only as a religion, but as a spiritual political framework, right, help people understand their kinship bonds, help people understand power, help people understand their identity. It's one of the pieces that I believe Jean Casimir makes this point in his book, the decolonial, what was it, the Haitians, a decolonial history. He talks about the fact that a lot of the people, the names that we know are people who grew up enslaved. Like, that was their condition. But a number of the people who fought, that's not the identity they saw themselves through. Like, they saw themselves, right, from their specific regions, right, as African warriors. They were trained in the art of warfare. And so the idea that, oh, this is who we are, we're rejecting enslavement was incomplete. They're like, no, these people who are dominating us. We have our ideas of spirit. We have our ideas of politics. We have our ideas of community that are resisting and overturning in order to shape our discipline in this way, shape our life, right? Shape the way that we can love each other in this way. So that's the first thing. Like the Vodou is directly tied to that. The second piece is for a number of people who then analyze what happens immediately after the revolution. They'll say that the revolution was incomplete because of those distinctions. You had your people who led the revolution, right? Who were doing the day-to-day fighting, were trying to restore these ways of being, the almost like a politics, a community of the Laku, like how we can exist together in this type of way. And you had your people who wanted to reproduce the idea of the French Republic. And so immediately restored some of the same types of class identities, but to have the same type of economies that existed. And I don't want to render it more shallow because again, it's nuanced. You have still people who have some of the most sharp revolutionary rebukes of enslavement of peoples and extend their solidarities worldwide. That's some of their political imagination gets shaped by the French. So Wade Nobles talks about that, like in conceptual incarceration. We're doing a project right now with my lab on being led, shout out to Niara, on intergenerational trauma. We call that témoignage, right? Hearing the testimonies of our elders. And a number of them are speaking specifically to this, right? That the fight, the revolution was incomplete because the ancestors didn't fully accept, right, the political logics, the spiritual logics of the people who led, right, the revolution, who fought on the ground, who had that they can embrace this type of freedom. Third piece, and I'm going to get right back to you.
Okay, because I have so many. Okay, go ahead. Got so excited. I'm like, I have so many questions.
The third piece is I want to be really specific also because there are some ideas that simply embracing the religion, the spiritual framework is the resistance in and of itself. But I want to highlight what I said earlier. A lot of these people had this, and they also had knowledge of fighting, warfare, resistance, right? They were soldiers. And so it's not just the conscious, it's also what one of my friends calls like opportunity structures. It's also the having cultivated the art of resistance as well, right? So allowing that to be a conduit for that consciousness. That's my thing.
Woo! Listen. Where were you when I needed professors? I would have gone into forensic psychology. I think a bunch of people listening to this are like, okay, I'm going to reroute. Where is Dr. Evan at? And all I know is if and when I'm ever incarcerated for any political crimes, not that I would hypothetically, I'm calling you. I'm writing your number on my arm in the midst of my... I'm gonna be like, you get me out. As you're talking, I'm also thinking, and I'm not going to get into this is for another time. I even probably want to do a whole episode on Panama and our canal, and you know, like really, really talk from Noriega to all the military. That's a whole other. But in better understanding part of my people's histories, including the indigenous people of the Kunayala and others, right? Like understanding that land, right, it appears to have such a role. And people don't see exactly until you read and learn and watch documentaries. And I remember having microfilm, you know, like reading some of this stuff and looking at some of this information and thinking, because at the time, early 2000s, it was such plethora, but so many of my professors, even if they were well-intentioned and badasses in their own right, let's say in feminism or in anti-racism work, but it's still, I'm going to say this with love, there still maybe wasn't a depth to understanding that colonial, psychological, physical, cultural wound, right? And how that continues to have an impact on peoples today. And so as I'm thinking of whether El Salvador, if we're talking about the Philippines, if we're talking about Rwanda, if we're talking about, right, Congo, Palestine, right, whether we're talking about any of our lands, I keep coming back to think about the land, right? And what is it in a practical and political strategic way? what is it, perhaps hypothetically, or maybe I would imagine but like, what is it about the land of Haiti, right? Like, what is it about, like, where it's positioned, where it is? I've heard people be like, oh, there's alien army bases, and then there's vibranium. I'm like, yes, Wakanda, right? Like, like right. I've heard all these theories, some of them that really tickle me, and I want to believe. I'm just wondering if you could speak to something about the land and where it's positioned and the positionality of why Haiti continues to be a place and a source where the Eye of Sauron, sorry, Lord of the Rings reference, if anyone watches, I'm such a nerd, right? Like, why the eyes of these colonial regimes keep looking that way and keep trying to take. I hope this makes sense.
Perfect sense.
Okay.
There's two pieces that I want to name. So I think what you were referencing in regards to the vibranium is a conversation that's actually been going on, I think, at a higher level the last, I would say, half decade around the iridium deposits that are in Haiti, right? So they talk about iridium. Now I feel bad because I used to want to do astronomy, and now I'm forgetting the difference between I believe it's a meteor, right? And so there's a deposit in Haiti, believe there's a deposit in South Africa, but it's again a resource that it's very rare to find globally. And again, you have some of these deposits in Haiti. One of the other pieces, and I'll extend it back to your question, is it's a place where people try to exploit Haitian people for labor, for violence. And so you have a long legacy of the US trying to do the way they talk about it, right, is trying to uplift the politics, the economies of Haiti, what effectively leads to the continued exploitation, the reduction, not even reduction, the complete refusal to acknowledge Haitian political will that in many ways traces back to the US occupation, right, in the early 1900s, where the US comes in, take over the Haitian treasury, thieve a whole bunch of money. I don't have the specific numbers on hand, but a good number of when we talk about reparations from France for Haiti, we also need to be including what the US, right, took in that period of time. And so I think there's the larger historical piece, right? The idea of the Haitian Revolution in and of itself. People talk about this all the time, right? It shook the world. And I remember this specific piece of history, I have this as a flashbulb moment, being under discussed when I was going through my own education. I remember one of my social studies teachers, I believe in 7th grade, being very specific to say that there was a Haitian Revolution. It didn't really inspire anybody else, but it was a quick moment of history, and then they moved on. I was like, that doesn't resonate. Like, how do you have this get it connected, right? And then, so to thread your question, Julius Scott does a great book. It's Common Winds, where he discusses even the revolution that takes place in Haiti is shaped by the politics of several of the distinct islands, right? Boukman Dati, in fact, comes over from, right, the island of Jamaica to shape that initial ceremony. So you constantly have this interweaving of rumor networks, intelligence systems, resistance. People learn to fight on this island. They bring those tactics. And so one of the things that we do when we analyze these histories sometimes is we almost like overlocate them, over centralize them, as if we don't know as African peoples. We've always been about shifting and sharing and adapting knowledges. You have people who learn how to fight warfare over in, right, the US, and then brought that to IET and resistance.
Yes.
So this is a distinct piece. The other piece I find, and Jemima Pierre does a lot of great work on this, you find the everyday Haitian person right now caught between both, right, transnational narcotic interests. People see the course that they can go through to shift and traffic drugs as optimal, right, for these economies. And so you have a lot of young Haitian people recruited into, right, these networks, right, to optimize that. But on the other hand, where you have politicians that have been supported specifically by, right, elites in the US, government in the US, who again are not beholden to the Haitian people. They're beholden to what we call core group interests. Right? We're talking about U.S., Canada, United Nations, right? These political interests over and above the people of Haiti themselves. And so you have these people who are caught between that, not allowed to exert their political will.
Mm.
And take this to your point about the land, right? People who historically could sustain themselves. My father writes about this all the time. He always talks about the way that Haitian people used to be able to sustain themselves off the land, grow food off the land. Now it's been ravaged as people are trying to shift and shape the land in order to meet the needs of global economy, right? Leading people to get, right? Don't get it confused. There's people making billions of dollars off of Haiti. It's not the Haitian people. Mhm.
Right. Right. And that's how colonization works. Right. 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 Even when the people are still on the land, we become almost servants or slaves to these masters in the land. Absolutely. And, Dr. Evan, as you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, it makes perfect sense that we need you as a professor because, I just want to thank you for I'm learning as you're talking things that I wasn't even aware of. I'm like, I need a book list like tomorrow. So we'll be sure, right? We'll be sure to get these books or these names into the show notes in case people are like, what? Wait, I'm driving. Because this is important. This is important. We also have a bookshop. I'll make sure that that's on the bookshop so that, people can see and read for themselves and absorb. But as you're talking, I'm like, thank you for making this digestible and relatable and connected to the level of violence and occupations, right, that are happening all over the world. Because although there might be different players and different small pieces, there is a commonality that is happening from Tigray to Palestine to even what has occurred, whether we're talking about Armenian genocide, right, and Holocaust and dot, 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 to what has happened to our First Nation indigenous people in Turtle Island. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself also like, whew, what's beautiful is that you also swim in healing. Right. Right. Which is something that I hold near and dear to my own heart. That, yeah, we could be smart and have a big frontal lobe. Right. Like, oh, what that frontal lobe do? Right. Like, yes, you smart, you cute, you have all that. You know what you're talking about. Don't blush. Okay, Dr. Evan. And at the same time, you care about it's not all up here and cerebral. You help us embody it, and you're interested in the embodiment, which is what I also think makes you, in my humble caring opinion, such a paradigm crusher, right? Again, this is what From Root to Bone is about, is like you naturally are like, yeah, how do we make this better? And yeah, Black psychology. And, are we continually bringing in the healing? Are we bringing back our people's healing? What does that look like? So could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, whether it's like with AB Psi, whether, it's with Ida, Beam, like, how does that come into it? And how does rage and grief come into it?
Oh, so wow, I'll answer that piece first, specifically around grief. We'll probably have a longer conversation, maybe a part two about the relationship with rage, because that's we'll put a pin in that. Grief is what got me here. Right,
Mm,
I was in college. I've told people about. I try to tell people about him as much as possible. My cousin died by suicide, um, and I immediately understood it as, right, being crushed by the weight of just
mm,
homophobia, anti-Blackness, intergenerational familial harms. But at the time, it's like I could have been there. But how did I not? I was just talking to him.
mm,
Why don't we talk about this? Why don't we talk? I don't understand. So for somebody to be going through that much pain, and at the time, right, in college, I was going through quite a, I would say, a heavy bout of depression, sadness, just lack of purpose at the time. Um, and so when that hit me, my purpose became the grief. It's like, listen, I remember being at the funeral. I was like, I never want this to happen to anybody that I care about again. Right. At the time, that's not a fair thing to put on yourself, but that's what I told myself. This is not going to happen to anybody. And so I'm going to dig as deep as I can into, they say psychology can help with this. Boom. I'm going to read everything I can about that. Right. I'm going to learn. I'm going to practice. I'm going to shift. I'm going to, whatever it takes, I'm going to like change the context that allowed that to happen. When I'm in grad school, I'm seeing that a large part of the issue is it's not enough, right? It's you talk about a context in which, in terms of like who we classify, quote unquote, as certified mental health providers, we're talking about 2 to 4% of those are Black. We know we deal with a whole range of structural oppression, not just here, but globally. Unfortunately, we know a lot of the world looks to the West for mental health and psychological innovation. And so it's not enough. The Association of Black Psychologists does a mental health workforce report. And beyond that number, over a quarter of people consider leaving because of burnout, amount of racism they receive. More than that, I believe is close to somewhere in the range of 40 to 60% never receive formal training on how to deal with Black people, right? The specific that organize the experiences of Black people. You're saying there's not enough. You're saying there's very little training. And it's barely even affordable. So for me, this is a quick aside. I get very frustrated when people talk about the main core issue as being stigma. Like, we don't,
Yes.
there was no, you took away all the stigma in the world and you suddenly made it affordable, right? We have the issue of efficacy, which we haven't necessarily been able to demonstrate. And so that's how I approached the healing circle. Was at this point, we're seeing, and there's evidence, the biggest thing people need, they want connection. Right? We have, at this point, when you expand how you understand evidence, generations of evidence of people healing in circles. Mhm. If you go beyond our current journals and recognize that there's a whole range of different efficacies and places that people trust, there's plenty of evidence of people sitting with one another and being able to heal.
Yes.
The Southbone and healing circles, they come from the broad African-centered healing circle movement. And shout out to the Community Healing Network, the emotional emancipation circles. And the piece there was during the COVID-19 pandemic, as people are losing all of their connections, they're sheltering in place. How can we create space so people can just see one another? Right? Sawubona comes from the Isi Zulu language that says, I see you, we see you.
Mm.
And by being seen, you bring me into existence.
Yeah.
Wade Nobles brings in the concept of the Kikongo construct of Zola, the idea of that self-activating love. So we can help people see one another. We can help that activating healing property that people have when they're in love and they're in connection.
Mm.
And so we broadly are trying to make these spaces accessible. Right? Listen, you don't need all those letters at the end of your name to hold healing space. Right? Want to give people the training so that they feel confident. But in terms of what the space looks like with the Southbone and healing circles, we want you to shape that based on your understanding of culture and practice. So we have people who've done it, they've done Tanzanian dances. We've had people from Zimbabwe doing libation. People in IET doing song and poetry. You've had gospel. We'll move through specific histories to shape this thing, histories of African American resistance. There are all these as modes and methods of healing and helping people understand the moment that they're in. And the idea is, listen, we can't keep waiting for these initiatives to diversify a field that right now it's not it's not able to meet the psychological distress that people are going through.
Facts.
Mhm.
Say that.
And so that's the general idea of the healing circle. Is we want to make this broad. We want to encourage people to think historically and creatively with how they hold their space. And this is the other academic and the political aspect. I do the research on the side. I'll give you the evidence that you want. Right?
Mm.
We published our first paper on the healing circle efficacy. I believe it came out last year, showing the documented right evidence of the phenomenological evidence of people feeling the release, the gratitude, the validation of being there. We just submitted a couple of days ago an extended qualitative analysis that we've done on how people transformed over the course of the healing circles. And we see these shifts in understanding kinship bonds, the validation, the community connectedness and purpose that people gain from being in those spaces. So then we don't need all the degrees. I don't want to even like psychologists can help people. There's a number of people who've had their lives transformed by psychologists, but we can't let that be the only option.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
I came to it with grief is I'm watching people I love get hurt, harmed, and unfortunately, I'm still losing people I deeply care about to suicide. Right? I just lost a dear friend of mine, India Huff, who's an incredible, incredible person. Um, which for me is like we just need to do this more. Like we shouldn't have our people that we care about in isolation, alone, dealing with the weight of, like we said, like these structures of oppression and harm that sever all these bonds. So
Yes.
it's what I bring. It's the urgency I bring through this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I also want to honor your losses and say thank you for sharing and bringing their names and their spirits into this space. Um, I think that so often there's like, oh, we can't talk about them or we can't. I'm like, why, bro? Like, yeah. Like, so thank you. And thank you for speaking to the grief. I know as, when I was in my, clinical psychology hat days, right. And doing it different and sometimes, breaking the rules of, well, you were taught this and you need to engage in psychodynamic ways, or you need to engage in just CBT ways, or, this and this and that. I'm not Haitian identified, which people know, but I'm not from Haiti. However, we had a great many students in Jersey City who were and did identify, and myself and another colleague who is not a psychologist, but worked in student affairs and also taught, noticed that we saw a lot of Haitian students that would frequently talk about their religion, whether it was Catholic, whether it was, that they also were engaged in voodoo. And there was this embarrassment if they did other, and this almost sorrow and feeling of like not wanting to unalive themselves and not be around, and they weren't directly connecting it to history. And I'm not saying I could directly correlate it to such, but when we connected to this feeling of not being connected, feeling lonely, feeling misunderstood, feeling, air quotations here, like bad, or like historically their families were bad. And bringing these students into my peer education group and having them to be able to connect, having them realize that there's a universality to this sense, especially for people of the global majority, right? Especially for Black folks, right? Our Filipino kids, our Palestinian kids, our Lebanese youth that were coming in, and realizing that although some of our struggles and feelings of dis-ease and disconnect look different, that what the remedy was. So I'm with you on this, my brother. Like the remedy was each other at its core, right? And this is what I kind of hear you saying was, and I was not as well informed in like the qualitative method, like reasons and rationales to like why group work worked for, so, other than like forming, storming, norming, and giving Irvin Yalom, like, the shit that we all read or knew about. But what really liberated me and helped me understand was also in bringing in the psychoeducation of their own histories, right? Like bringing in that little that's not little, but like that psychoeducational component of like, well, do your people historically struggle with blank and blank? What was your Mama Dukes doing? What was this? What were your cousins? How many of your cousins were incarcerated for what? What was it? Like really kind of diving deeper into that and noticing how that impacted their everyday life, and then finding ways to release it. Which is why I'm a little bit of a fan of rage, because, healthy releases of it, right? Like, not like I'm gonna just take my shit out on everybody and then it's your issue and your trauma, but holding space for all aspects of ourselves. So I just want to say that I really love this about your work, and I'm a big group person. It saved my life at 18, 19 years old, and what I did for 13 years. So I really dig this shit. And I think more than ever, if therapists or psychologists social workers are going to keep doing this work, I'm like, okay, more groups then, right? And expand the group out to fit gender identity, culture. Like, what do people need? Does that make, I don't know, does that make,
No, it makes perfect sense. And what I love about the circle also is it even lessens. I remember the first time I was doing therapy, and the amount of weight and pressure I felt for that person's healing. Read it again, everything I'm thinking about, I've been waiting to get to this moment. And so I've learned, I've read, I've every single note, and I'm sitting in front of the person who's saying the college counselor said that I think they were worried about their test. I'm like, okay, how could I use all of my superpowers that I'm trying to generate to make this thing go away? And again, you're individualizing, right, somebody's care and putting all the weight, right, on you to alleviate somebody of that sadness, which again, for them might be important. They might just need to be sad, and that doesn't mean anything's going on.
Mm.
What I love about the circles is it relieves even the idea that, oh, I'm gonna be the person that magically makes everything go away. What I've seen in the circle, which I love, is here's the case in group. Like, the most wise, grounding thing might not come from me. It's you heard that other person's story, oh, and that resonated. Right? I said something, and maybe I went too academic, but this other person said it is like, oh, I get it. Okay, now this
Yeah.
makes
Yes, yes, yes. Right. And that peer support, right? That internal, like and that role modeling that has nothing to do with us as the facilitators or the leaders or but that role modeling of, oh shit. And that's what I used to love about my peppers, my peer educators as well, is that, you had some people that therapy wasn't a thing they talked about in their families, right? Like, we weren't talking about therapy. We would talk about going upstate,
yeah.
commissary. We'll talk about drugs. We'll talk about all of this other stuff, how to be quiet, not to say, we'll talk about everything, but not necessarily talking about feelings, but I'd love seeing that some of my, harder core people be like, oh, I'm sorry, if you could just wait your turn, or yeah, when I was feeling such and such, I felt hella sad, and this is how I took care of myself. And I'm sitting there like, yes, work, honey, or giving feedback, right? It's so simple, the concept of giving feedback to one another, but that feedback where you could just sit back. Those are the times where I felt most like parent. I don't know how to explain it, right? Like, I don't have my own children, but I feel like I have parented, reparented, and not in this like hierarchy way. In
Yeah.
this like sitting back and watching the beautiful ability to say, like, help people learn how to do healthier connection. Cause we didn't all get that, right? I know I didn't. Right? Like how do you, resource yourself and also reflect back what someone's saying? How do you deal with conflict in a way that is healthy? Cause that's still right? How do you deal with attraction where there it might not supposed to be there? And like, how do you talk about that, or how do you bring that into the space of the room? So, um, yeah, I could talk about that's part 2 of our interview. I could
Yeah.
talk about like group and reflection and circles and healing circles. And I thank you for this work, because you're also so deeply humble. Like you're a brilliant, bro. Like, you're so brilliant, and you're deeply humble about it, and deeply giving, both to those that came before you, wrote before you, psychologized before you, expanded before you, and those that are trying to do the work to heal and reconnect with themselves. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you for that presence and humility. Um, And you know, I gotta ask a question about something like really quick. I know we can keep going on, and I know we need to wrap up, and I want to honor your time and all. But
I want to tell a quick story too. But
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Ask the question. Ask the question first.
No, go ahead.
Well, because this is what I want to say too for the podcast. So for me, I'm gonna tell a story how we met, right? Because we hadn't been in contact. For me, Dr. Jenn, I tell her this all the time, was celebrity, right? Like Dr. Jenn had all the followers. She's helping everybody learn. I'm watching everybody share stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, this is one of those ones. This is one of those ones, right? And then out of the blue, I don't think we'd had a conversation. Out of the blue, someone's like, yo, you know, he put you in the book. I was like, what you talking about? Like, who? Me? He's like, yeah, there's a whole section. You, the Auguste, right? That's Auguste right here. That's you. I was like, hold on, right? We had the conversation, and then the first thing was that like you said, you brilliant. I'm like, she's talking to me, like she's helped translate this work for so many people, right? I felt like I was in there thinking, I'm running through all my like theories. How could I say something that will be worth this person's time because the work you do is so fantastic, right? So that's what I want to say. Like you say humble, I say like, and I think you know this too. There's so many incredible people that we know that because of their politics, because of their emotional disposition, like they're not going to be out in space.
Yes.
And so for me, I always feel blessed to be in conversation with those people. Right. And so it doesn't feel like any type of, because it's never been about me. I just want to be a part of the team shifting things. Right. And so being in conversation with you is always a blessing. Um, the fact that we actually got to sit down at the conference recently was fantastic. So that's what I want to say. Right. Is you
Thank you.
extend so much grace and you uplift so many people. So I'm going to send those flowers right back.
Thank you. I'm working on receiving. I'm so hard. We talked about that at the conference. Like I'm so horrible at it. I'm like, not horrible. I'm a little awkward, nerdy self. Just like, no. I like learning. I like learning and I like synthesizing things, right? Like, I mean, it's kind of what we do is like we take this like, oh yes, everybody needs to know about this. Everybody needs to know about this. And we want to feed the people. Right. And thank you. So I receive. Thank you so much. And so I have a last question for you. Well, I'm trying to squeeze 2 questions in one. I'm sneaky. Okay, give me a second. Let me sit on this. Okay. You you derive from such rich intergenerational history. Your people are warriors, fucking healers. Your people like the core of what revolutionary is. You started bringing in your grandfather, who clearly is badass of their own, you know. And even as you're speaking, I'm just like becoming more and more grateful for you in this world and how you speak out against harm unapologetically, and then back it up with like your little research is, you know, like okay, and because that's how we have to do too, right? So white counterparts of you and I can just say things, but we need to have books that have all these resources, yay long, right? And back it up with all this shit. Sorry. That was a little petty comment. Rewind. So as I was saying, I'm conscious, and I can sometimes do it, and I have to shift my perspective of focusing on these like intergenerational traumas, you know, like the heaviness, like we know what comes with, right? But for you personally, what has been some of the intergenerational joys or wisdoms, the beauty that you have also received, that you bring into this world from your people, from your parents, from your, you know, from wherever? Like, what is some of the juiciness that you want people to know about as well?
I love that question. I was thinking about it the other day. I think like I love my curiosity. I talked to my father about it. I talked to my mother about it. And my father will always talk about how he got it from his grandfather. Right. So now we on my father's side, who said he used to read. So my father is the biggest fan of his father. Like he spoke all these different languages. He had a whole library. He used to ride into Capastin on his horse, and he would teach this and he would teach that. And that's the way that my father approached life. My father is self-teaching himself Chinese right now because he just wants to learn so many different languages. Right? So that curiosity is one of the things that has made even this academic world like tolerable because I love having the time to dig deep into these histories. Right, some of it is for use. Right, I want to be really clear. I see the strategic benefit of some of these histories. Some of it is I just love learning these stories. I think they're cool, and I love that they nourish me. They fill me up. Uh, my mom is like that too. My mom, the daydreamer. Every single thing she's going to be daydreaming. That's where I got that from when I was younger. I always be in class, and she said she would be like this. I know a lot of people are like this. Like the person would start talking about some physics lesson, then all of a sudden she saw herself on the moon, right, as an astronaut. Like that's where I kind of got that from, like the creativity, the curiosity. And in terms of intergenerational, I would describe it as like repair. I think sometimes we think about ourselves of having to do all of that work. One of the things that was really clear, like my father loved my grandfather. My grandfather was not the most loving individual. Right? He did not always express that. He was sometimes it could look violent, sometimes it could look angry. And so my father, because of that, every single day of when people say like, "Oh, men don't say they love each other," I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like I've grown up with that every single day of my life. Is my father coming and saying, "Yo, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you." Every single day, he's gonna teach me that in French. He's gonna teach me that in Creole. I love you, I love you, I love you. And
We love you, Dad.
I love that man, Louis Joseph Auguste. Love that man. And so that's a gift that he was really intentional about, shifting that intergenerationally. And so that's a gift from him. And
Beautiful.
yeah, it gives me the hope to continue to do that as we move on.
Beautiful. It makes sense why you have this energy, where you've had such a beautiful, loving experience with your father, So that's beautiful watching. I'm imagining cis hetero men, right? Like Black men or Haitian men be able to express, right? So yeah, I'm like always like, what else is possible? This is what's possible too, right? We are living ancestral artifacts, right? We are changing the fucking histories. Um, yeah, and so okay, I fibbed. One last question. It's a little question. It's not a big question. What would 14 keeps coming up. So what would 14-year-old little E-Boogie, little Evan, say about you today? How would they feel about you?
Evan at 14 wanted to be an astrophysicist, archaeologist, like all these things, but he also wanted to write. And so he would have been really excited that I've been writing so much. He would love that. 14-year-old Evan would that's when I was just starting to get into psychology. And so he would love to see how far I took it. And I got some stories for him that I think he'd find pretty entertaining, pretty interesting. So I think we'd be okay. Again, I didn't become the astronaut track star that he might have been thinking about, but we did okay. Well, okay. I'll feel blessed for what I'm able to do, how I'm able to do it. It's a gift that doesn't extend from me. It's so many people who fought to create this space that I could work in. So I feel blessed for that every day.
That's so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Evan. We appreciate you deeply. I appreciate you. And I'm wondering, you know, what is there one last thing, anything you want folks to know?
Yeah. So I'm gonna call back to a piece I had said when we talked about the nature of Haitian Vodou in revolution. And I brought up the importance of training, the importance of what one of my friends calls opportunity structures. To say, I think people have such a clear consciousness now of what is going on, what is being done to them. I think it is essential for our own safety, for our own security, that we take that communal responsibility now to invest in those collective organizations, those spaces where we can move and create those new futures because we know right now they're under direct assault and it's scary and it's terrifying. That's exactly why we have to keep each other safe. So that's what I would say, right, is
Yes.
investing your time, your energy into the spaces that can keep you secure. That's they're also going to keep you nourished, is what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Woo! I don't want it to come to a close, but can you tell us what are some of the ways that people can connect with you, or if they want to engage in your beautiful healing circles or workshops or research? Like, tell us how to find you.
Yeah. So my main public facing space right now is on Instagram. So at dr.evan.auguste on Instagram. I share a lot of the works, the projects, some of the writing that I've been doing. Follow Incultured Company, Incultured Co. Right everywhere. That's where you'll see some of the healing circle work we're doing in IET, La Kutanama. We've launched those in the last few months, and right now they're Afro Taino spaces of healing and critical creativity that are being shaped right now. So shout out to our partner over there, Nadej Robertson, who's doing an incredible job with that work on the ground. Also check out IDA, right, .nyc to see some of our education that we're doing, right, on decarcerating care. So I would say those spaces. And also quickly, please follow the Association of Black Psychologists. I owe so much of my education and my approach to the scholarship and the legacy, the energy that comes from them. So ABSI, we do healing circles at this point 4 or 5 times a week. So if you want to experience one, you can sign up tomorrow. Right? If you're listening right now, you go to ABSI on anything, you can sign up for a healing circle probably right now and get that experience. So those are the places to check out what we got going on.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And of course, folks listening, we will put all of that in the show notes, as well as some of these amazing books. We deeply thank you. I thank you, Dr. Evan Auguste. Thank you so much for the ways that you walk in this world, your energy, your vibration, your brilliance, your brain. Thank you for the ways that you care and how your love gets communicated. Even though I think that's very Taurian energy. I just had to put that in. I had to bother you and say that. And for folks listening, again, may you also take this in, let it land, take a few deep breaths after listening. Don't close your eyes if you're driving or doing something, operating heavy machinery, but find ways to resource yourself. Drink a lot of water that is as clean as possible, right? Because clean, that's a whole other workshop, a whole other podcast, but also find a way to dance, cry, release, shake, tap, hum, sing, post this podcast, because believe it or not, we are, bringing in this healing, transformative, metabolizing energy and stuff in you vibration. So whether or not you are Haitian, there is very likely, if you've gotten to the end of this podcast, that your people have or are continuing to experience some very deep oppression, or your people have had the hand in engaging in violent oppression and colonialism. And so either way, we need to get free. And we need each other to undo some of the systemic, intergenerational, ancestral levels of pain so that we can collectively unfurl and fucking be well, and resist together. Right? So we will never again be in this place, at this space, at this time, with these people, with one another. So thank you again, Dr. Evan. So much love for you, and may you continue to uplift and continue to fight this badass fight.
Dr. Jenn, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. From Root to Bone is a podcast from Decolonizing Therapy. It is hosted by me, Dr. Jenn Mullen. Our producer is Tribble at Ash Tribble Incorporated. Original music by Laura Burke and cover art by Madre Shell. Don't forget to find us on Instagram at Decolonizing Therapy and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Decolonizing Therapy, for the full video version of each episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your people and leave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps people find us. For more info about Decolonizing Therapy, visit our website, www.decolonizingtherapy.com. Be well.